Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Melissa, and today we have Mike Miller. He's our senior engineer here, specializing in security and modern work at Infused Innovations. You've heard from him a couple times before. The last time he was on the podcast, we talked about managing Windows 10 security with Microsoft Endpoint Manager. And today we plan to chat about the 5 things that leaders must stop doing in order to better their security for their technology and their organizations. But before we get into that, Mike, how are you and how was your Thanksgiving?
Yeah, Thanksgiving was great. Thanks for asking. I got a lot of good family time in and got to see some people I haven't seen for a while. So it's always nice to unplug for the weekend and relax and hang out with friends and family. So how was yours?
It was good. Oh my gosh, we had that extra day off, but I feel like I could have used another one. But it was good. Lots of good food. Yeah, good moments with my crazy niece who's 2 and she's a riot.
Yeah, all of a sudden I woke up and it was Sunday and I was trying to figure out where the weekend had gone.
Right. Well, thank you so much for being here with me again. I always love having you on the podcast, and cybersecurity is such a hot topic. So it's great having you on here to talk with me about it. And right now, I think so many organizations, because they're switching to remote or hybrid work, they're experiencing a lot of vulnerabilities online and a lot of different ways that their organization can be taken advantage of. So today I wanted to ask you and talk with you about the 5 things that you think leaders need to stop doing to better secure their technology. So I'll just have you take it away with the first one if you want.
Yeah, I'll actually start by saying these are 5 things that I've seen most organizations doing. I certainly don't mean for this to be an all-inclusive list or in any particular order. These were, just the 5 things that I think are important to bring up. But with that being said, the first one is I really think leadership needs to stop viewing data security as an IT problem and acknowledge that it's a responsibility of the entire organization. So what I mean is, yes, IT should have different layers of security applied, something from MFA and least privilege to data encryption policies. But everyone in the organization should be aware of what data they're handling and the proper handling and distributing of that data as needed. Obviously, you don't want to be giving out data if you don't need to, but if you need to, you need to know you're doing it the right way. This leads to ensuring you're providing your employees with proper cyber awareness training, and this training should also be recurring, not just a one-time occurrence. Regular business users are not in security. They're not going to remember it if you just give them a training one time. This needs to be a recurring, at least annual training that you're giving to your users.
Awesome. Yeah, you answered my questions. I was going to say, okay, well, how do we do that? And that's education. And then how often? So you think at least maybe once a year, leaders should be taking some time with their team and just saying like, hey, this is how we fix this. This is important. These are the different layers of security. This is MFA. This is how it works. This is why it's important. And just basically all of the basic things that you don't need to know or you don't really need to know if you're not in IT, but you need to understand how it works for you.
Yeah, we can take, email training for instance there. So if you get a new employee to the company, you want them to undergo, that initial training that everyone receives in the organization. And then, if you have users that are maybe falling for your phishing training, maybe they need a remedial training, right? So that they need a follow-up training to try to understand where they went wrong, what they can improve on, and what to look for next time. And then after that, you want to keep them up to date with the new trends, the new type of phishing attacks that people are trying to use. So we try to go on a yearly basis, but if we're seeing a really heavy trend in one direction, then we'll update our end users in that situation. And it just kind of comes down to having that discussion when you feel like you need to have it as an organization.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If your employees are getting a lot of emails and they're falling for those emails with, phishing attacks, then obviously that's an area that you want to focus on and educate a little bit better. What would you say is the second thing that leaders need to stop doing?
Yeah, I would say they should stop failing to align security with their business goals. And this goes both ways. Leadership should be including security in their business goals and overall vision of the company to ensure that they're not opening unnecessary security holes, such as choosing a less secure platform, or maybe it's a less secure piece of technology like a security camera, a physical security camera, or whatever the case may be. But at the same time, the IT security, IT department leaders and team members can't live in a little IT bubble where they're not aware of the decisions that they're making and what the overall business impact of those decisions are. If you're going to turn off access for the entire company, you need to understand that. You need to be able to test that, make sure that the downtime is as little as possible.
Yeah, that reminds me of this quote that I hear a lot from you guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, please. But I think it's that security should not be bolted on, it should be bolted in. Is that how that works?
Yeah, I think one of our coworkers, Brian, has said that a couple times, and he's right. You want to always make sure security is incorporated in everything you do, because if you don't, you're going to leave it behind, and then you've opened yourself up to a possible avenue of attack.
Right. And then I think you're so much more safer because you have so many different walls up and patches up and so many different holes that I think someone would have to go through to get to your information, as opposed to one piece of security just being bolted on at the end. So that's great. Give us your next one. What's the third one?
It's funny that you brought up patches there, because my third one is stop letting your systems fall behind on patches. This may seem like an IT thing, and I'll agree. IT should be running this. They should be ensuring these updates are happening. They should have their maintenance plan in place. But as a business leader, you need to ensure that that's actually happening. IT has so many different things going on, and I'm never excusing leaving patching as a back burner. That should never be a back burner. It should constantly be tested and rolled out accordingly. However, companies like Microsoft for Windows operating systems, or their Microsoft applications, or Google, like Google Chrome, they release these security patches for a reason, whether it's a vulnerability that's being exploited in the wild or a vulnerability that their own research has discovered. They're releasing these updates to secure those, and you need to make sure that your business and your IT teams are doing what they need to do to protect your organization from those threats.
Tell me why some leaders, or I guess people in the IT or cybersecurity department, would fall behind on patches. Is that something that is less of a priority, or can you explain that a little bit?
In the security realm, we take patching very seriously. There needs to be a documented practice on it. You need to have an actual maintenance plan in place, and you need to have somebody in charge of following that and ensuring it's getting completed. It can't just be one person holding themselves responsible for this. Everyone needs to be involved in making sure this happens.
Okay, got it. So there's absolutely no logic or reason for why some organizations just let patching fall to the wayside. Can you give us insight on what the next thing is that leaders or executives and organizations need to stop doing?
Yeah, and this one might be a little hard to hear, but stop thinking it won't be you. You're not too small. You're not too big. You're not too secure or insignificant. Breaches are happening. They're going to happen to you. Your organization is either in line tomorrow or 10 years down the road from now. With that being said, it is critical that your organization has a proper incident response plan in place and ensure that it's updated as needed, updated with the times, updated with changes that happen in the organization. Whatever the case may be, just make sure it's constantly updated as it needs to be. And, kind of to back that up a little bit, IBM and the Ponemon Institute do a cost of a data breach report every year. And in the 2021 report that they recently released, organizations with an incident response plan in place saved on average about $2.46 million in comparison to organizations that did not have one. So an organization that gets breached, they have an incident response in place, compared to an organization that doesn't. They're saving about 2.46 million. And obviously, the organization depends on the financial impact, whether it's the size, the amount of data breach, whatever the case may be. That's just the average number from the report that they pull.
And what would you say to organizations that have the mindset of, we're not a large company, we don't have a ton of data, we don't have, there's not a lot for us to offer? What would you say to these companies?
I would say that one credit card is enough for somebody to want to compromise your information. With that mindset, you would assume that nobody would ever want to compromise your bank account or your personal information. But personal identity attacks happen every single day. And it's because it's one piece of information. If somebody can get that, it's going to open up holes to even more. So just because your company is really small, they may be compromising your company to get more information about you or the CEO or the CTO specifically. It's an avenue that they're taking to get whatever information they want. So, one credit card, one piece of personal information is enough information for them to want to compromise your company.
Yeah, that really puts things into perspective, actually, because even for me, I think about it, I'm like, yeah, I mean, I've definitely had my credit card compromised, and I'm just one person. I'm not even a business. I don't have any extra data. Like, if they're going to come for me, then why wouldn't they go for a smaller business that probably has a lot of, even if there's, 10, 15, 20 employees, there's a decent amount of information in there that they can get a hold of. So
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, Mike, give us the very last thing that leaders need to stop doing to better secure their technology.
Yeah, and this one is kind of unfortunate because we do see it a lot. I think it's really important that leadership, whether it's, the CEO or IT leadership, really needs to stop being unaware of where company data is, but also what access is granted to that data. So we see it time and time again where organizations have information stored in, something like a wide open folder on their on-premise file share. And by wide open, I mean everybody in the company has access to it, but it has sensitive credit card information in it. The engineering department may not need access to a client's credit card information. So there's no reason for that to be wide open. We also see it all the time where they're being stored in different cloud providers like Box or Google Drive, OneDrive, different guest access having too much privilege to a folder that's been shared outside of the organization. And with that being said, most likely those accounts aren't being managed by the internal IT team. So there's probably basic passwords, maybe no MFA on those cloud accounts. And we see that all the time. And there are so many cloud access security brokers out there to help with this. Here at Infused Innovations, we often help our clients utilize Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, which is formerly Microsoft Cloud App Security, a recent name change thanks to Ignite, to get insights to this information and then get control over that data. This could also be companies are letting end users authorize random cloud applications that they navigate to access their company information. So it could be something like just being able to read the calendar. Maybe it's and I'm not throwing shade against any application, but maybe it's Calendly, which people use all the time to have many shared calendars. That's a read calendar permission, but there are other applications out there that are going to have write permissions to inboxes. They're going to have write permissions to data that's been given access to it. And that's unnecessary information for an unknown third party to have.
What would your tip be with that? Do you think that it's important to always read the permission rights before downloading something on your computer or for your organization? Or do you think in general, it's like, hey, let's skip all of these little mini applications and little mini, tools and find a holistic system where everything's integrated and everything's secure? What's your take on that?
Well, the latter there is, always the end goal, the holistic approach and everything secure, but that's not always going to be the practical solution. So I think this kind of goes back to that end user training. They're going to get that prompt after they enter their information saying, do you authorize this program to read your inbox, to write your inbox, to read and manage your calendar, right? So they want to understand what access they're giving to it and then have the training background to kind of question that access. And then they can take that up with, the internal IT team or maybe their manager, and they can work it out at the leadership level to determine if this is a needed application within the business.
Yeah, and that kind of loops back to having that basic understanding and education of things to even look out for when you're running an organization or even just as an employee. Like, what are things that I should be cautious of or paying attention to when I'm online?
I will say there are certainly ways out there to just block end users from doing that. That's not always the best case scenario for organizations. So it really just comes together where security falls on everyone, not just the IT department, and end users being trained and knowing what to look for.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Well, thank you, Mike. That was awesome. Filled with great tidbits of security, things that if you're an organization or you're a leader that you should be paying attention to. I'm sure, have you on the podcast again, Mike, and I appreciate you being here with me.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Leslie. I had fun as always.